health impacts of extreme heat can be devastating, and as summer heat waves intensify, advocates say access to cooling should be treated as a human right. Blair Feltmate is head of the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo. He's in Calgary. Blair, hello.
Good morning.
What does that mean, access to cooling as a fundamental human right?
Well, we have to make it such that when the heat waves hit, people that are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat, which tends to be the low-income earners, particularly elderly, and those with pre-existing medical conditions that may be respiratory and or cardiac in nature. These are people that when they're exposed to extreme heat, it's not just discomfort, they can actually die. And we've seen this in Canada, for example, the extreme events of extreme heat with deaths. For example, in BC in 2021, 619 people died prematurely due to extreme heat. In Quebec in 2018, 86 people died prematurely due to extreme heat. And the extreme heat that we're experiencing now, which is very, very challenging and we're breaking records, more extreme heat is on its way, driven by climate change. So as bad as things are right now and challenging as they may be, more extreme heat is coming. And we need to make access to cooling, particularly for those vulnerable groups that I just mentioned. We have to give them access to cooling, otherwise they will succumb.
So what does that mean? Again, we heard that senior talk about the idea of splash pads for seniors, which I think might sound very refreshing on a hot day like a lot of people are going through right now. But are we talking about air conditioning? Is that what access to cooling means?
There's two components to it, but there's active cooling and there's passive cooling. Active cooling is air conditioning. And so what we need is particularly for seniors, this is the most vulnerable group, so I'll zero in on those. We need to make sure that they have at least one cool room in their apartment. One room that they can go into that has air conditioning. It could be as simple as a 5,000 BTU air conditioner that can cool that room down and give people a place to go and be safe when extreme heat hits. And we may have to implement programs through a means test to identify that these are certain elderly people, they simply can't afford an air conditioner on their own.
So you give subsidies for air conditionings?
Yes, exactly.
What else beyond air conditioning? I mean, that's one thing. We've talked about the idea, and you see them in some urban centers, but perhaps they're under, not the idea of more cooling centers as the climate continues to change and those heat waves get longer and longer.
Yeah, we can have cooling centers, we can have misting stations, but also we need to have more shade, tree canopy within cities to give people a place to go and escape the direct impacts of the sunlight when they're outside. But in apartments, for example, we also need to retrofit such that we have either glazing on windows or awnings over windows or mechanical shutters to keep the sunlight out of apartment units, more venting within buildings to allow heat to escape up and out of a building passively. So we need a combination of both passive and active cooling working sort of hand in glove to keep temperatures tolerable. For example, you see this in much of Europe, where awnings are on almost every apartment building you look at. They have real awnings that extend out over balconies that attenuate sunlight from coming into units, combined with heat pumps or air conditioning, and the two working together can keep the temperature inside the units tolerable.
The organization that represents migrant farm workers says that in heat waves like the ones that are roaring through parts of Canada and the United States right now, those who are out picking our strawberries or planting for a later harvest, they need to be considered as well. And some of those farms should be shut down if it's that hot. Do you go that far?
I don't know about shutting them down, but certainly for people that work outside, people exposed to extreme heat all day, we need changes in the time of day that they work. In other words, starting early in the morning and probably finishing work by noon before the extreme intense heat of the day hits. So we're going to increasingly so we are going to see adjustments in the time of day people work for those who work outside under when the extreme heat conditions hit. And by the way, extreme heat is in a different category than all other manifestations of climate change and extreme weather risk, where we're talking about flooding or wildfires or other means of expressions of extreme weather. Because with flooding and wildfires, when these events occur, by and large, people don't die, or it's at very low numbers, maybe 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And I don't mean to be insensitive, like more than one person dying is one too many. But with extreme heat, it's the one when things go wrong, people die, and they die in very high numbers, in the hundreds and if not into the thousands.
And your sense is, just before I let you go, that if governments don't take this on in a meaningful way, that those numbers will just go up.
Absolutely, definitely. We will have events where it won't just be hundreds, it will be thousands of people dying. In Europe in 2022, we had 61,000 people succumb to heat attributable deaths, and we're not immune to that in Canada.
Blair, thank you very much for this.
Thank you for having me.
Blair Feltmate is the head of the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo.